Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and see my presentation. My name is James Campbell, and I'm the SVP of Cloud Strategy over at Darktrace. For those that don't know Darktrace, Darktrace is a leader in AI native cybersecurity. And just to give you a quick background as well, my background is in cyber incident response and digital forensics for the kind of past 18 odd years, both in the intelligence space, but also the consulting space, helping all sorts of customers across all industries with all sorts of weird and wonderful compromises. Well, I wouldn't say wonderful, but compromises nonetheless. And so, kind of coming in today, I'm leveraging a lot of that experience and a lot of kind of what my customers experience into what's kind of coming next and what we really should be worried about. And more particularly, what's coming next when it comes to cloud security and why we really need to evolve in that space to be kind of faster, in real time, making sure we're thinking about automation and how we're going to tackle this, new era we're entering into when it comes to AI and the cloud. So kind of going straight into it, I kind of want to level set a little bit in kind of, how people tend to think about the approach of security regardless if it's a new product, a new environment, whether it's cloud or on-prem, normally people do tend to start with the prevention side. And that's usually because we have frameworks to reference or compliance kind of obligations on this side. So in the form of cloud, you'd be thinking about CSPM tooling or CNAPP tooling. And we do tend to start here. And this is where people are most comfortable. But as we go towards the right here on this slide in detection, response, and investigation, we gradually find cloud being a little bit more complicated, and it gets more complicated as you go to the right. And that's where we start to feel uncomfortable, and we kind of lack the knowledge or the ability to actually go and tackle these spaces fully. And we end up with kind of a mishmash of kind of process, a mishmash of tooling, just to try and keep our head above water on this side. Detection is definitely becoming, a real important space here. And this is in the form of, say, cloud detection and response. Obviously we're thinking about the new threats that are coming up and how we're going to detect those. But just as important is how we're going to be responding to those at machine speed or AI speed, insert name here, speed. But we need to respond quick, right? But we also need to do that with a lot of context. And getting context usually takes a while. And again, adds another layer of complexity when it comes to cloud. So I'm going to kind of touch base on each one of these points throughout the presentation and kind of give you some food for thought more than anything. So I'm not really going to talk to you more specifically about tooling or anything like that, but I really want to give you some food for thought about the threat landscape that is coming and how can you go about dealing with that, and what should we be thinking about in regards to what's next for cloud security. So diving into kind of the problem space a little bit. So cloud has really changed the landscape. So in the way that we operate, no one's kind of physically going and installing servers anymore. No one's installing a physical router. You can literally click a button and have access to services you've never had access to before, literally within seconds or minutes. And once more, a lot of these services can be short-lived. So just as quick as you can spin them up, they can also spin down and you can lose the data. And that's what we call ephemeral infrastructure or ephemeral style services. And that data can disappear quickly as well. And so this kind of dynamic in cloud really changes the game when it comes to thinking about security and how do we approach it. The other thing as well we need to kind of think about is just there are more layers to everything. There's more data points. You've got the control plane layer now. You've got our runtime layer. We've got network. We have APIs to deal with, and now we have agent infrastructure when it comes to people utilizing kind of AI tooling as well that's out there. And so kind of all these kind of data points are new and different, and we need to find a way of kind of gluing them all together to really understand what's happening at each one of these layers when it comes to my cloud infrastructure and ultimately what's happening at a particular moment in time when I need to find out. Now, obviously, on top of that, because things can move quick, because there's multiple data layers, and then, things can execute quickly, just as much as we can leverage cloud to move quick, so can threat actors as well and various threats. And that's why kind of understanding and seeing things in real time in your cloud environment, such as using a cloud detection and response platform, is critical because I need to be able to detect what's happening, be able to respond to that. But I need to be able to do that at machine speed, not at human speed, especially with the threats that are coming down the pipeline now. And kind of speaking of threats, let's kind of level set here. The world is changing, and it's evolving, and it's evolved more in the past year than I would say in my career it has in the last decade. And so it's moving quick, and we really need to start thinking about what we can do today, not tomorrow. These are things we need to be thinking about today from a threat landscape perspective. And then I'll go into kind of what are some of the approaches you should be thinking about after we discuss some of the threats here. So kind of moving into some kind of practical examples. Booz recently released a report, recommended read, where they identified that kind of AI-driven attacks have like kind of decreased the time to full system compromise or full network compromise to under 30 minutes. So that's from initial access to a full compromise in under 30 minutes. That is fast. And I can tell you now that is faster than a human can move and respond to an incident in real time. So it's just something to kind of keep in perspective that we're actually seeing this. In fact, Darktrace runs a honeypotting infrastructure where we monitor for cloud threats, and most of those cloud threats we see are actually autonomous. They're actually automated, and some of our infrastructure we see from a honeypotting perspective gets compromised roughly every 15 minutes. Now that is fast. So something to kind of think about is just the sheer speed of things in which things are moving towards. Now, if you've obviously, unless you've been on holiday, you've definitely heard about Mythos. You've definitely heard a lot of people talking about vulnerabilities. Look, before even Mythos, last year, the vulnerability space grew by over 20%. So that's 20% more CVEs and more vulnerabilities identified. And I should say these are known vulnerabilities as well, by the way. These are reported vulnerabilities have been identified over the last year. That's 48,000 CVEs, 48,000, vulnerabilities to go and see if I'm at risk of. That's crazy, right? And now with Mythos and kind of AI being utilized to identify vulnerabilities now from, various hackers and threat actor groups now leveraging these technologies, we're really fighting an impossible battle here. You're not going to be able to go and patch all the things. You're not going to be able to stop all the things or preempt all the things. We're moving to a different space. Most of the things that are up and coming, you're not going to know about until it's too late. And we need to be prepared for that. So you can't just rely on going and patch all the things anymore. It's just not practical. Still an important part of your day to day, but you can't assume that you're going to be across it all and you will miss things and often. This is an oldie but a goldie, I would say. Everybody knows about credential abuse. It's one of the most common ways hackers gain access, right? But with cloud and with AI as well, we need to start thinking beyond just the human, right? We're not just talking about humans anymore when it comes to credentials. And with cloud, it brings a whole nother layer to this. And when I say it brings another layer, I mean now we're dealing with machine identities. We're dealing with agent identities even. We're dealing with API keys. We're dealing with tokens. And we're dealing with third-party access from other applications as well, where we don't really know or have visibility of what they're doing. And so there's so many various ways you can do credential abuse, and cloud only increase the number of kind of ways that can actually happen. Let me give you an example where we saw a particular threat actor actually sending malicious spear phishing emails to cloud administrators. Now, these malicious spear phishing emails actually had a script attached to it. It's called a cloud formation script, which is a script that allows you to automate setting up AWS infrastructure. There are other ways of doing this as well, of course. Just giving one example, it's not just AWS, there are other CSPs that are being targeted as well. But what would happen is that if basically a cloud admin clicked on this script, it would actually set up an account with administrative privileges for that particular hacker at a click of a button. That's crazy. And the reason why they think that works is because they assume I'm emailing a cloud administrator, right? The chances of that cloud administrator being logged onto the cloud platform at that particular moment in time, because that's their day job, is pretty high. And so when they download and click on this script to see what it does, it assumes that they have access to the cloud environment already, and therefore it creates whatever the hacker wants to create within your cloud infrastructure within seconds. And then within seconds, the hacker can find out that they have access and they can go and do what they need to do within your cloud environment before anybody really has detected it in the first place. So pretty scary stuff from that perspective. And kind of moving on to a newer threat, I would say, was definitely a new threat, but one that everybody's obviously shouting about as well, and that is AI. And I definitely am a big believer in embracing cloud technologies, and definitely a big believer in embracing AI technologies. And I think you have to as an organization in order to kind of keep pace with the world today. But obviously, this brings new risk. And look, one of those risks might not even be the malicious usage of AI. It could just be shadow AI. And what do I mean by that? That could be unsanctioned use of AI and other platforms within your environment. Now, remember at the beginning of the presentation, I was saying at a click of a button, the cloud has changed the landscape, right? Because at a click of a button, I can go and access a new service. I can go and spin up a new server or whatever it might be. And the same goes with AI. And now I can go spin up a service, whether that's utilizing AI directly, kind of like Amazon Bedrock as an example, or kind of Claude MCP service. I also might spin up a service which behind the scenes has AI built into it and also is kind of siphoning data off to a model somewhere in the world. This brings a new challenge and a new problem and a new kind of data layer or a new thing we have to keep visibility of within our environment. You want to be able to identify who's using AI, who's using AI tooling, and in what way, and what does it have access to? And is that sanctioned or not sanctioned? Is that within policy or outside of policy? And is it exposing us to added risk? Is our data leaving our environment and we just don't know it? So a big thing that our customers are concerned about right now is just that increasing adoption of AI, which is great in one sense, but it's creating a problem of shadow AI, not being able to understand who's actually using it and where is our data going, and has this created a risk, which means we're not compliant, or in fact could lead to a compromise of our data and our network behind the scenes without us knowing. And so, all these things kind of coming together, and I've only touched it on a few kind of high level points there. Kind of all these things coming together, it goes to show just in such a short period of time, the threat landscape is evolving rapidly, faster than I've ever seen in my entire career. And, the threat actors are also leveraging these technologies already. We are actively seeing threat actors leverage these technologies. And so we need to think about what, not what should we be doing tomorrow, really. We should be thinking about what we should be doing today. Like, this is your call to arms. This is your sense of urgency that you need. We really need to be thinking about this new evolution of threats and the evolution of the threat landscape and how do we go and tackle this. And so let's kind of dive into that a little bit about how Darktrace does it, and how our customers utilize what Darktrace does to kind of protect themselves in this kind of growing threat landscape. So kind of moving on to the more positive end after that scary little bit, let's talk about what we can do about it, or what we at least should think about when it comes to our approach in cloud security within the AI era. And the first and foremost one is, and kind of going back to that CVE slide, you would remember, that's pretty overwhelming. 48,000 CVEs, just impossible. And it's only going to get worse. And so we need to move away from detecting the knowns, so the known bad, and we need to start thinking about behavioral monitoring. And what do I mean by that? So when it comes to behavioral monitoring, I mean kind of detecting the unknowns or the unusual. So it might be something unusual for that human. It might be something unusual for that machine, so that server or system. It might be something unusual for that perfectly legitimate AI agent. We want to be able to spot what is unusual from behavioral monitoring perspective. And the reason why we want to do that is because most of the threats that are coming over the next year or two, we probably don't even know about. And so we need to start thinking about behavioral monitoring and what is unusual for those particular threats. So I'll give you one practical example. We might have a human who logs into a system for the very first time. Okay, I could probably trigger that. That is a bit unusual. But what happens if it is usual they log into that system? Okay, user logs into that system or that human logs into that system and they access data they've never accessed in their entire 10 years of being in the company. Now that starts to be a little bit unusual from there. Now, what I can do is start to chain these unusual things together from a behavioral perspective, which is exactly what Darktrace does, and actually flag that as a detection that something unusual is happening here. And then we need to start looking at what our response options are. And that kind of visibility is that next piece. So not only do I need to, see what's unusual, but I need to look at what's unusual over multiple layers. That's email, that's network, that's cloud, that's AI, APIs, you know, all those sorts of different data layers need to come together because they cross over each other in a day-to-day interaction perspective from either a human, machine, or AI. And we need to be able to pull together that data into kind of one pane of glass, so to say, or one view, and learn about what is really going on there and what's abnormal compared to the day-to-day operation of that individual or that identity, whether that's a machine or a human. And then once we kind of detect those things, how do we go and respond in an automated way and kind of go and do something about it, right? So speaking of going and do something about it, one of the critical things here is, and we just talked about kind of detecting the unknowns, which is going to be an absolute central part of our future over the next year or two, is how do we find out more context? How do we do that in an automated way as well? One of the unique things about cloud particularly is data disappears really quickly. So what happens if there is a little bit of unusual here, but I don't have enough context to really solidify that because the data that I need to investigate has disappeared? Well, that's a big classic problem a lot of our customers have a problem with utilizing cloud technologies today. And I'm sure some of you do as well, such as Kubernetes and containers or Lambda functions, etc., short-lived services. This, you can have a detection in one of those, but have no way of actually investigating the data within them because now they've disappeared. So how do we go and tackle this? We need to think about automation. The great thing is that AI and cloud solves its own problem. We're kind of fighting AI with AI and we're fighting kind of cloud issues with cloud issues here because cloud is awesome at automating things and leveraging that AI-driven detection, so that behavioral analysis detection, we can go and trigger automated capture of forensic data of that additional data sources that we need to give you the complete picture. And that is essential because one, we want to move it at machine speed, and we want to make sure, and two, we want to make sure we grab that data quickly before it disappears. Second, we use AI to kind of triage that data and give us a real rich sense of what is going on and why that's important. One, because I can understand as a, as a user of this data or as an analyst, what exactly is going on. But even more important, because I'm confident in what's going on, I can take real action when it comes to autonomous response. And again, kind of autonomy is the theme here, where we need to move to autonomous response. Now, 50% of Darktrace customers use autonomous response in fully automated mode. So on detection, we go investigate what happened, and then we go and mitigate and actually block that attack, allowing humans to catch up to what is going on. And the same goes for the threat landscape going forward as well. We need to fully understand what is going on off the back of protection to create a really good response. So that might be blocking initial access for credentials that shouldn't be accessed in the first place. Or, what our behavioral situation might be, that users always access that system, but they've never accessed this data point to the point 4 on the slide here. And so we block the data access and exfiltration at that point, again, buying the human time to catch up and understand what's really going on here and unlocking it all. And then lastly, and wrapping up, just reflecting on this all, I know it sounds a bit doom and gloom, but at the same time, cloud and AI really also helps us solve these challenges. And that is what Darktrace has set out to do. We do really need to think about real-time detection. We need to think about behavioral detection as well, because you're not going to understand or know the new up and coming threats that are coming to our environment. It would be impossible to keep across everything. So you need to think about behavioral detection. This needs to happen fast at machine speed, at AI speed, right? We're going to fight AI with AI. The human is in the loop, you're going to lose over the next year or two. So you need to start getting that into your environment now. And then we need to think about bringing all those different data layers together. That's super important. Having visibility of just one thing or two things or three things, we need to have visibility of multiple things in order to get a full context of what is really happening. And then even from an investigation perspective, we have to deal with how cloud moves. Cloud moves fast, data disappears fast. We've got to be automatically grabbing that data on detection and doing automated investigations. And that really helps you get a full understanding of what is happening in your environment and control the narrative of what's next. Thank you everybody for listening to the presentation. Go visit our website at darktrace.com.